Hi, Sam Forde here for runatonce.com with a burning question. Why do you get tilted by fish? Why is it that you get rubbed up the wrong way by what should be your prize catch? The fish is the biggest donor at the table. The fish is your primary source of income. But somehow your reactions to him can turn to contempt, frustration, and anger. And then you do whatever it is that you do to alleviate those feelings, like quietly stew or stupidly spew, or just hold on to it as fodder for bad beat gossip. Every now and again, a fish will get under your skin, and it's embarrassing for the stoic poker expert that you are. Why, oh why, do you get tilted by fish?
That was terrific!
Great! Yeah! Best fish! Fantastic! Yeah, it's really great!
In this video, I'm going to talk about envy, resentment, and blame, and our odd relationship to pleasure and pain. Envy in that we see the fish as hogging what's rightfully ours, causing resentment. Blame in the sense of seeing the fish as a scapegoat. We have this fantasy of what the game will offer us, and we see the fish irrationally as an obstacle between us and the satisfaction of this fulfilled fantasy. And this is closely connected to the last idea, which is our relationship to pleasure and pain. We misunderstand the nature of enjoyment. And I think if we can realign our understanding of where our enjoyment comes from in the game, this has the potential to cure this form of tilt. In the second half of the video, I'll try unpacking a little bit what we even mean by this catch-all phrase, tilt, so that we can address it better. But let's talk about envy, about the fish as hogging what's rightfully yours. You get tilted by the fish because you envy the way in which he is capable of enjoying the game. He has access to a special kind of enjoyment by virtue of being a fish. He appears free in the ways that you are not. He isn't reined in and trapped in a sense by professionalism, discipline, self-control, rational and calculated play. He doesn't have to submit to those rules in the way that you do. He is getting to enjoy something that you can't. And what all your disdain and contempt for him covers up is the deeper truth in a sense that you wish you were a fish. Well, not really, but you wish that you could enjoy the game in the way that he does. But why does this make you tilt? On some level, you care more about destroying his enjoyment than protecting your own interests. This is the power of envy and resentment. It's like the old story of a farmer who comes across a witch, and the witch offers him a deal. She says she can give him 1 cow and give his neighbor 2 cows, or she can take 1 cow away from him and take away 2 cows from his neighbor. His eyes widen with excitement, and he immediately chooses the second option. Imagine maybe 3 cows is their net worth or something. So it's the same for us. We don't just want to beat the fish. We want to shut the door on his capacity to enjoy the game. Cue all these weird situations which make no sense. Like, why is that reg berating the fish? Why are you getting in these crazy spots over and over again with that certified maniac? Why do all the reasons that you're giving for your play all sound like cooked up rationalizations that you manufactured after the fact to explain your reactive outbursts? It's like Gore Vidal put it, quote, "It's not enough to succeed, others must fail." In other words, it's not enough for me to win, others must lose. If we have to choose between our gain and our opponent's loss, we get more enjoyment out of the opponent's loss, even if it means that we get hurt in the process. Isn't this the logic of reg battles? Maybe there's a more obvious form of resentment, which usually gets called entitlement tilt. And the outrage here is, how dare the game reward him? This carefree imbecile. Here I am, working so hard, doing all the right things. It reminds me right away of the famous parable of the prodigal son in the Gospels. You have this young man who asks his dad for his share of the inheritance, goes off to live a wild lifestyle and loses it all, hits rock bottom, comes home ashamed, but his dad welcomes him with open arms, celebrates him, honors him with a feast, etc. And meanwhile, fuming is his older brother, the brother who's been doing everything that's expected of him. He's been working hard, he's been growing the family business, he's been fulfilling all his responsibilities. And he looks at this chump, his degen brother who's come groveling home, been not just welcomed but celebrated and rewarded by his dad. A moment captured in this painting by Rembrandt. Henry Nouwen was quite smitten with this painting, and he writes about the brother, quote, "The brother did all the right things. He was obedient, dutiful, law-abiding, hard-working. People respected him, admired him, praised him, and likely considered him a model son. Outwardly, the elder son was faultless. But when confronted by his father's joy at the return of his younger brother, a dark power erupts in him and boils to the surface. Suddenly there becomes glaringly visible a resentful, proud, unkind, selfish person, one that has remained deeply hidden, even though it has been growing stronger and more powerful over the years." End quote. Resentment. It simmers and simmers, and then one day it erupts. I chose this story from the 1st century and this painting from the 17th century to make the point that envy is deeply woven into the fabric of everyday life and has been for millennia. So let's not be surprised that it shows up in the competitive environment of poker. Let's talk about the fish as scapegoat. We have this idea. This is how the game should be. This is how things should be. But there's a gap between our ideal and our lived reality. So we look for someone or something to blame, a scapegoat which offers us a tidy explanation for why our world isn't complete. We blame or resent the fish for unjustly violating our rights to this thing. We see ourselves as competent and solid, so we deserve a reward, and it somehow gets stolen from us. Or maybe, we know that we don't deserve it as much as we'd like, and we project our internal conflicts onto others. Players blaming the dealer and lashing out at the dealer is a pathetic example of this. When we have a fantasy in mind of what the game should be rewarding us with, we can then cook up reasons for why we are being blocked from reaching the satisfaction of that fantasy. It's not even finding excuses necessarily. I think it's more insidious than that. The practice of blaming fish creates an enjoyment in its own right. Even though it might come with all sorts of emotions, many of them not pleasant, there's a certain kind of enjoyment in seeing the fish or seeing other players as a block to us fulfilling our potential. There's this kind of addictive quality to blaming others. We all know the cliche of the low-stakes player who complains that they should move to higher stakes where people will actually respect their raises. Adam Sandler addresses this beautifully in a Saturday Night Live skit called Romano Tours, which I highly recommend looking up on YouTube and watching. It's a 5-minute video.
But remember, you're still going to be you on vacation. If you are sad where you are, and then you get on a plane to Italy, to you in Italy will be the same sad you from before, just in a new place. Does that make sense?
The you from New Jersey is still the same old you on holiday in Italy, and you shouldn't be blaming Romano Tours for your unhappiness. Moving to stakes where they respect your raises, well, hopefully there's been enough high-stakes streaming in the last couple of years to cure people of that idea anyhow. But the Romano Tours principle is the idea. Wherever you go, there you are. The idea of the fish as an actual obstacle to unbridled success, or whatever it is the fantasy is of course completely absurd. If you remove the perceived obstacle, what's left? If you were playing against RTA soldiers, would your win rate suddenly shoot up? No, it makes no sense. The fish is your source of profits, but it's not about that. It doesn't change the incredible appeal of seeing him as an obstacle. Being able to blame him or whatever other obstacle in the game sustains our own fantasy. I mean, don't we spew in this way too? Maybe betraying ourselves by spewing allows us to keep alive the fantasy of how well we would be succeeding if it wasn't for those moments. I know it sounds ridiculous, but this basic division in ourselves applies to lots of situations. Well, we're consciously pursuing XYZ goal and simultaneously undermining ourselves and then blaming perceived obstacles. Envy is really hard to make sense of. There's a variation on that story of the witch and the farmer, which I told before, where she just says, hey, whatever you ask for, I'll do double to your neighbor. And the farmer just straight away says, oh, pluck out my eye. Here we're touching on the mysteries of enjoyment. I think we misunderstand the nature of enjoyment. So I want to talk about pleasure and pain, or maybe pleasure in pain would be more accurate. What is enjoyment? It seems obvious. We just think it's the same as pleasure, but it's quite complex and my own understanding is very limited. But I'll take a stab. Enjoyment is excessive and irrational. There's enjoyment in routines being blown up. There's enjoyment in chasing things that could hurt us. There's enjoyment in acting against our best interests. We keep eating long after we've had enough. We smoke knowing that it'll kill us. We get involved in volatile love-hate, on-off relationships. And sure, we have the goal of pleasure in mind. We pursue pleasure in some intentional way with our intentions and goals. But enjoyment is more the addiction, the obsession, the passionate devotion, even when those things are damaging. Even though enjoyment can be damaging, or often is, there's something attractive about how it disrupts our little status quo. It's one of those factors that gives life its je ne sais quoi. Put it this way, enjoyment is a massive driving force, but it has very little connection to the plans that we would put on paper. And one of the mysterious aspects of enjoyment is how it connects to suffering. Here's some examples. Why do we doom scroll when the main effect it has on us is anxiety? Because we can experience enjoyment as anxiety. You can obsessively scroll on X or whatever forum and read comments from people who disagree with you. You get tilted by this, but at the same time, you're sucked into it. You get trapped by it. There's enjoyment in it. What's another example? Enjoyment is the roller coaster ride. We get the pleasure of dropping on the way down, the tension release, the thrill of that. But then there's also the slow climb, which builds tension. It's not like it's pleasurable in itself, but it is enjoyable. It's the delay before pleasure. You have those other rides like the giant drops and the slingshot rides have the anxious wait. You don't know when it'll fire, and that's the thrill. So we have the conscious goal of the eventual pleasure, but the discomfort and tension on the path to it is the actual enjoyment. And we need both these things working together. It's pleasure and pain, enjoyment through suffering. If you remove the suffering, you can see how empty the pleasure becomes. Like if a roller coaster was just going downhill all the time. I kind of imagine this as one of the traps of being mega rich. Not only do you have the same old you in Italy as you had in Michigan, but you have an overdose of too easy to access pleasure, which means there are actually more blocks to your enjoyment in the way that we're describing it here. Another example, enjoyment is supporting a sports team through the ups and downs of a season. Who cares about a sports team that just wins and wins and wins constantly with no real opposition? Sure, we fantasize about our team winning, and we get pleasure out of our team winning, but the enjoyment, the thing that makes you a fan, is the struggle. And there's an enjoyment in transgression. We like to see rules being broken. There's enjoyment in destruction. Like we rehash the mishaps of others through gossip. We laugh at others falling over. We like seeing bad things happen to bad people. Yeah, and we just get a kick out of unexpected things happening. And we even enjoy our own destruction. Again, the smoking, the overeating, the drinking, all those things. I think self-destruction is a more common driver than we think. But in poker, it's even more obvious. I mean, gambling has this incredible appeal. You can be irrational. You can go against normal limits and norms and expectations, you can let it overwhelm you. You can push past the limits. You can go down, 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 and get enjoyment from it. Feel pleasure and pain as you ride the variance all the way. I think it's worth reflecting on times in the game or aspects of the game in which we're prone to finding ways of lashing out at ourselves. I mean, when you lash out at the fish, your best customer, aren't you just attacking yourself? When you spew, aren't you just attacking yourself? Maybe some days all the rituals of the game are just a background scene on which you're bracing yourself for some kind of self-destruction. And this, again, is a pleasure which is more accessible to the fish, more accessible and more acceptable for the fish, hence our resentment and envy. So, enjoyment is complicated, and I'm not saying I'm right about this. This is sort of just ideas. And your envy and resentment of the fish is wrapped up in this. Your blame, entitlement are wrapped up in this. So if I could bring this section together in a single idea to apply, it would be that we need to shift our locus of satisfaction away from the idea that we need to overcome all obstacles that are getting in the way of our fantasy. And instead, we need to embrace that the obstacle is where the enjoyment lies. Stoics like to say, the obstacle is the way. The meaning here is a bit different, but the slogan works the same. Embrace incompleteness, embrace the wrestle, embrace the randomness of the fish, embrace the variance, embrace the fact that irrational feelings show up at times, understand that these obstacles are the reason why poker is interesting.
That isn't the way to play it.
Why not?
Because it isn't the way to win.
Is there a way to win?
There's a way to lose more slowly.
Switching gears now, I just want to unpack this word tilt in the hopes of enhancing our connection to what happens to us at a emotional level in the game of poker. Tilt, there's nothing wrong with this word. It's a useful word. It's good shorthand. It's a way of expressing a bunch of emotions in a socially acceptable way. You could have a chat with any poker player, no matter where they're from, after a tough session and talk about being tilted, and they would understand. It's a convenient way of communicating in a shared language. And we use it in two main ways. One is where we say, I'm tilted because of something or by something. And the other is where we don't even need to take any responsibility and we just talk about something being tilting. You know, it was tilting. The situation was tilting. In any case, it's helpful shorthand. It's the same way that we say, hi, how are you? How's it going? And it's not really a question that needs an answer. It's a way of acknowledging someone without the perils of coming up with something more original. So there's a kind of a safety in being able to have that exchange without getting too creative. So I'm not here to diss the word tilt. My concern here is the question, why do you get tilted by fish? And to think about this, I think we do need to unpack it a little bit. It's too broad, it's too general a term. Wittgenstein, a thinker whose work I don't know anything about, but is very credible, put it this way: the limits of my language mean the limits of my world. That's a neat quote. Language isn't everything, but it is significant in shaping our lived experience. When you have words to describe aspects of your experience, this does shape, to some degree, your lived experience itself. When you have a name for something, like an emotion or a sensation, you become more aware of it, your relationship to it is affected. This is why, certain therapies or mindfulness approaches will promote the idea of saying things like, here comes the anxiety, or there goes that knot in my stomach, or whatever. once the emotion or the sensation exists more clearly in the symbolic space of language and has a clear, word, a clear signifier attached to it, then you can actually negotiate some distance to it more easily. So, one trick is that when you notice a certain thought, you can say, I'm having the thought that, it creates some distance. So, oh, what an idiot. I'm having the thought that he's an idiot. Or extra distance, I notice I'm having the thought that he's an idiot. Having it in language allows you to have a little bit more distance to it. You step in more into the observer, seeing thoughts and feelings for what they are in a sense, which is temporary stuff that your mind is throwing at you. Having some sense of this helps us to just not get so automatically caught up in compulsively wrestling with thoughts and feelings, reacting to them, trying to make them go away. As soon as you feel something which feels like anger, that sense that something needs to be put right, you feel weak and someone needs to be put down. And a common one, depending on your kind of history and context, is that sense that if someone is disrespecting you, in other words, you're feeling disrespected, then they need to be put in their place, this kind of thing. There's a world in which you can experience the feelings that lead up to these ways in which you act out and intercept them by having some space to maneuver and make some choices rather than being tied to some script about what happens when you feel this. So what do we mean by tilted and tilting? Well, I could start a quick list, but it's much better if you do this yourself because you're the one who's having these experiences within your own way of seeing the world in your own body, your own context, and so on. So rather than someone labeling this, it's better if we can come up with our own experience near definitions of things. Off the top of my head, if I said it was tilting, it might mean it was unexpected, it was unwanted, it was not what I was hoping for, or it was confronting, it was unfair. If I say I'm tilted, I think the most common meaning it would have for me is I feel let down, I feel disappointed, and at other times, I feel frustrated, I feel angry. Could make your own list like this and see what comes up, see what stands out, and reflect on that. It might help to think of recent examples and just replay the story. Who was there? What happens? What did you do after? And ask some questions which just bring you more into your inner experience. And if something is showing up as a bit of a pattern, you can ask yourself questions like, what is the main feeling you're left with when this happens? How do you feel when thing happens or player does X? What were the thoughts you were having when this thing happened? What do you find yourself thinking when a player does this or that? What do you do when ... When that happens, how do you typically respond? And how would you like to be able to respond? These are just questions taking you into kind of more of your inner experience. So finding more words in this way can expand what we mean by tilt. The other thing we can do is talk about tilt, but enrich our descriptions of it. For example, how intense was it? On a scale of 1 to 10, how intensely did you tilt in that spot? And maybe here tilt is, you've narrowed it down to being an experience of anger. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how intensely did you experience anger in that spot? You can open this up to all sorts of emotions and get more in touch around with how you're living the game. How intensely did you live the joy of winning that session in your first foray into 5K No Limit? So intensity is one way of kind of reflecting on emotions. Another example is thinking about speed. For you, does tilt come on really fast or does it build up slowly? And you might want to think of recent experiences to be able to answer that. Again, extending this idea of speed to quote-unquote positive emotions is good practice too. So how quickly were you able to activate that sense of confidence after the initial moment of fear? And what is tilt showing up for? Is there something important to you that tilt could be trying to protect? There's a lot to say about this, and tons of exercises we can use to begin to talk about emotions in a more accurate way, and also get a sense of sensations in a more accurate way too. I have this last point here on the slide. This question, is it possible it's just a reaction of your body? We have this thing too where we experience a certain sensation and we instantly interpret it based on the usual story that we have for it. But you can experience the same sensation when you're in love or a bit sick or hungry. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're anxious because in this particular game you felt this way before and it was related to you feeling bad. And so you experience the sensation and it comes with this thought of, oh no, here we go again. I'm having this anxiety or whatever it is. But it might just be the sensation. So this is something that we can learn to navigate. But again, I encourage you to take some time with this. Don't let tilt be the word that describes the whole spectrum of experiences that we have in the game. The limits of our language mean the limits of our world. We can expand our connection and awareness to all our experiences in the game. Okay, that's all for today. All the best at the tables, and see you next time.